Welcome back. Those of you that watched my channel more than a year ago might remember a video called Chess as Art, and it looks something like this. I'll just play a little clip of it for a second. Now in that video I covered a game in which my opponent and I, which was one of you, my subscribers, played a 300 move game on Lichess. Neither of us trying to win, but both of us trying to make the game go as long as possible and reaching as many interesting positions as we could, like the one on the board where it looks almost entirely symmetrical. And after a while, we just decided to see how far it could go, but apparently the Lichess system ends games at 300 moves. Whether or not you've reached the 300 move rule, whether or not, any other things apply, even if somebody's in check, it stopped at 300 and automatically declared the game a draw. But we had a lot of fun doing it, and so when I ran into that same opponent over on chess.com, we decided to try it again, and we didn't know what the total move limit would be on chess.com. And I'm going to take a look at that game here today, but without music and without showing you every single move, so it won't take that long. All right, this is the game here. Now, would just like to point out that where it says draw by agreement, we only agreed to a draw because after 500 moves, chess.com wouldn't allow either one of us to make another move. It was my opponent's move at that time, and they simply could not make a move. They shared with me screenshots from their browser on their computer where it said, oops, something went wrong when they tried to make the 500th or 501st move, and they shared with me screenshots from their tablet where when they tried to make that move, it said, sorry, service unavailable, try again later or something. But it was letting them make moves in other games. It just wouldn't let us, either one of us, make any moves after 500, so they offered me a draw and I accepted. It also wouldn't run the game review. This little pre-game review that has run right here said we combined, I don't know if that's combined or if that's just me, 296 blunders, 226 misses, and 63 mistakes. But when I clicked game review, it just wouldn't do it. In this game, because I knew it was the same opponent, when they opened with the knight move and I opened with a similar mirroring knight move, and then they got the other knight out and I got my other knight out, I had a feeling that we were going to be in for the same sort of game. Just to be clear, I didn't collude with them. We didn't send a message to each other and say, hey, let's see if we can get the longest game that we can. It kind of happened organically. I could tell that my opponent, who's rated a couple of 100 points lower than me, wasn't really playing a serious game, and so I decided not to play a very serious game either. And as you can see, it started out with a lot of knight moves just like the previous one did. I think that's just because knights are the easiest pieces to move into cool patterns around the board. They're also the only pieces that can move without any pawn moves. And if you know the rules of chess, you know there's a move called the 50 move rule, which means the game automatically ends in a draw if both players make 50 moves without either one moving a pawn or making a capture. So starting with a knight move means you haven't moved a pawn yet, so you still have a lot of pawn moves left. After 8 moves, we had reached this position here with the knight cube in the center of the board, and by move 14, we had put the knights back on their home squares. Except something's a little off there. The knights aren't on their home squares, they're on the other knight's home squares, which I thought was funny. Okay, maybe nothing's going on in my life if I think this is funny, but maybe you'll get a game like this someday too where your opponent will cooperate with you. It works easier in a daily game, by the way, not like a rapid game where you'll both run out of time. On a daily game where you each have 24 hours or more to make every move, that works better for this. And by move 56, we had this column up and down the E-file with all 4 rooks moved in just a little bit so the 4 corners are empty. Not exactly a symmetrical position because the D-file's empty, but anyway, I thought that was cute. And by move 88, we haven't moved much else. In fact, we've moved more pawns than we had to avoid the 50 move rule, but you also have to avoid repeating positions. And I think that was something that my opponent had in mind as well as I did. When you're just moving knights around the board, you might not remember, did we have the knights in that exact position before? And the only way to avoid that repetition is by, pushing another pawn, and then you can put the knights wherever you want them. In this case, moving both the E and D pawns for both players meant we had an extra place to tuck all the knights. And just a few moves later, we had the knights moved forward into the center, and we had the bishops tucked in there behind those pawns. So now this is, as far as I can tell, a completely symmetrical position with both the E and the D files completely filled up. And a few moves later, we got the rooks in there, and so now the corners are empty, and I think it looks pretty cool, don't you? And by move 134, we had all the pieces back on the back ranks with their proper colors, but you might notice that the pieces aren't in the correct positions. We were able to move the kings and queens over, put the bishops in the middle, and then both knights over on the side. It's not exactly symmetrical because one of the pawns hasn't moved here on black's side, but this is move 134. We have a lot more to go. By move 177, we again had all the pieces back on the back rows with their correct colors, and this time the same amount of pawns moved each, but if you'll notice, the kings and queens are on the other side, and the knights are on the left now. That took quite a bit of shuffling to get all those pieces to move with just those 4 gaps behind those 4 pawns. And on move 195, we had the exact same position. The only thing that changed in between those positions was that the queens came out and went all the way across and then went back to their positions. And it wasn't until move 382 that we got the last pawn off its starting square, so now all the pawns have moved up one square. By move 425, we had finally got a couple of pawns touching each other in the center, and we have all the pieces over in the same 8 squares over on the left side. And it wasn't easy because you have to avoid checks, but by move 490, we had all the pieces in the middle 4 ranks, and nobody's been captured yet. We actually did have a couple of checks on the way in there, but they weren't checks where anything was forced to be captured. And yes, this is a completely legal position, and we got here by 100% legal moves. And I got it into my head that I would try to get all the pieces back on the back rank before, we ran out of moves, but I didn't know the game was going to end at move 500, so we started bringing our kings back to the back rank, putting rooks back in their positions. We were going to end up having the incorrect bishops on the, some of these squares. I don't know why we have the kings on the D file, but anyway, after that knight move, that's the 500th move, and the system wouldn't let us play any more moves. So anyway, if you ever had an idea like you wanted to play the longest game possible, you can't do that, as far as I can tell, on chess.com or Lichess. Lichess will declare an automatic draw after 300 moves, and on chess.com, after 500 moves, neither player will be allowed to move anymore, and you might as well offer a draw. Or if it's not you, let the other player time out and you'll get a win. By the way, these were not rated games. Intentional rating manipulation is against the rules as far as I know of both of these sites, so these games were unrated. But anyway, I hope that was interesting and fun for you. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.